Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below, your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly for pricing. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing details. Today, we're discussing a watch launched as you see it here in 2017. This is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Jumbo, the ultra thin, reference 15202 in BA form, that is yellow gold. So the timepiece is the classical Royal Oak Jumbo, 39 millimeters in diameter in yellow gold. I measure it 8.2 millimeters thick. From lug to lug, the case alone is 48.6 millimeters, but if we add these little intermediate links, the total rigid distance across the wrist, that is the fit distance, is 51.9 millimeters. So we'll throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and get a good look at the watch. Every Royal Oak wears larger than its rated size. So whereas this is a 39 on paper, the feel is more like a 41 millimeter round watch, and I encourage you to size to your wrist accordingly. I believe you need a wrist of at least 14 centimeters circumference to wear this watch, but you will note it is very thin. These days, the Jumbo, especially in solid gold form, is more of a sporty dress watch than the upscale sports watch it may have been once upon a time. That said, we have the same level of attention to detail. Designer Gerald Genta considered himself a jewelry designer first and a watch designer second. So he designed the Royal Oak back in 1972 to incorporate the form of a bracelet that just happened to include a timepiece. That is why the case, the lugs, and the bracelet meld together into a continuous flow of yellow ore. You'll also appreciate the quality of the finishing. It takes 9 to 11 hours to hand finish every metal Royal Oak bracelet. The detail is exceptional. We have vertical satin finish on the edge, we have polish on the flank, we have satin across the top, we have little polished intermediate link faces, and then of course there's this wonderful diminishing bevel that continues off the transitional surface of the links across the lug hoods and then disappears at the mid case before flaring again at the opposite side. Removable links here are fixed by screws. You have quite a few removable links to size up. The clasp is a sequential fold, double deployant. You can see the gauge is quite thick here. It really is a substantial clasp for a Jumbo. It feels robust enough to be on an offshore. You can see it's a combination of satin finish with brushed and media blasting, and we have twin trigger release so it cannot pop open. There's the AP logo. Rolling over to the case, one of the splendid elements of this enduring design is how the character lines of the bezel continue through the mid case, continue through the case back. You can see this one features a three-piece case, bezel, mid case, and case back. The bracelet is held to the case using screws and bars, which is a very secure and upscale way of building an expensive and heavy sports watch. The watch has longitudinal satin finish on its flank as well as on the lug hoods. There are those transitional bevels. The iconic rounded octagon bezel inspired by a vintage diving helmet back in 1972. It features a satin finished outer lip, then the rounded flank is polished, and then there's a vertical satin finish from top to bottom. The hexagonal bolts that are within the bezel are white gold, which is why they're a slightly whiter color than the yellow gold of the case. You can see that the crown is hexagonal to match the shape of the bolts, and the dial is the Petite Tapisserie. It is the hobnail in its smallest size with a blue coating, and of course this is the original Royal Oak dial. Blue hobnail cut on a pantograph. A pantograph is a 19th century mimicry lathe that takes a big template and then duplicates that pattern onto a smaller brass blank that becomes the dial. It is then galvanized blue to create the color you see here. As a result, there are tens of thousands of tiny details on this dial. It's not just the hobnails. The closer you get, the better you appreciate the texture. Now, in 2012, AP redesigned the Jumbo, or they refreshed it to reflect heritage elements. The logo moved from 12 o'clock down to 6. We gained these elongated baton-style indices, and you can see that we lost the radially arrayed Arabic numerals outside of the indices. In 2012, we also got a date disc that matches the color of the dials. This reflects the final iteration of the 15202 before the 16202 replaced it. Now we have one feature that's a little bit unconventional, and it is the way you set the date on this movement. The movement was originally designed in 1967 for Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, and Vacheron Constantin. Jaeger-LeCoultre created the movement on commission to those three with the understanding that it would be used by those three exclusively, and the JLC would never sell it to anyone else or use it on its own JLC branded watches. Now you can see as I change the date, this has a ratcheting semi-quickset mechanism. So the way that works is you ratchet back and forth, and then you advance, and you basically ratchet between 10 p.m. and 12 a.m., and that is how the date change mechanism works on this vintage movement. I call it a vintage movement because they're made new, but the architecture is circa 1967. These days, Audemars Piguet makes this movement in-house and finishes it in-house, so it is, properly speaking, caliber 2121, now an Audemars Piguet movement with JLC roots. You can see it features a free-sprung gyromax style balance that beats away at a vintagey 19,800 vibrations per hour. All of this pivots on 36 jewels. The timepiece includes a annular rotor system. So you can see there's a beryllium ring that runs all the way around the movement. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 ruby pivot bearings that sit underneath it. So it can be sunk real close to the base plate, and the rotor, which is the weight on one side, can be sunk very close to the bridges, and there's no danger of these coming in contact with the bridges or plates. That's what this annular ring support system is all about. That's why you don't just have a pivoting rotor that's freestanding. It's a very thin movement. The basic movement of the 2121 is only 2.4 millimeters thick, and even with the date, it's only 3.05 millimeters thick. The watch is 50 meters water resistant, but it's a push-down crown, so I don't recommend it for swimming. The movement is beautifully finished. It's a unidirectional automatic winder with a 40-hour power reserve, and what really sets this apart from the 16202's caliber 7121 is that this movement features much more obviously hand-laid and hand-finished anglage on its bridges. It is much more obviously executed by hand. This is a much more intensively hand-finished movement than other Audemars Piguet calibers like the 4302 or the 4401, and maybe even more than the 7121, the new jumbo caliber. This is a movement with a shorter power reserve than the new jumbo, and it has no true date quickset. But if you can live without those features, this features the same size, proportions, and even movement as the original jumbo. It's as close to the original model as you can come. And frankly, I like history. I think watchmaking in the modern era, at least in the luxury echelon, is all about deference to history, and using this movement with its historical links and its aesthetic beauty is more important to me than a bit more power reserve and a quick set date. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of this elaborately handcrafted Royal Oak Jumbo.